They ask the question, you answer it. They ask it again. You answer it again. And then, before you have fully closed your mouth, before the last word has even landed, they ask it again. The exact same question, word for word, as if you said nothing at all. And somewhere between the 4th and the 14th time, something shifts in you. Not anger, exactly, something closer to bewilderment. A quiet, slightly desperate wondering about what is actually happening inside this small person's brain that makes them do this, because it cannot be that they did not hear you. They are looking directly at you. It cannot be that they forgot. It has been 11 seconds. So what is it? Here is what nobody tells you about the repetitive questioning phase. It is not a communication failure. It is not a memory problem. It is not a sign that something is wrong with your child or with how you are answering. It is one of the most sophisticated cognitive and emotional operations a young brain knows how to perform. And once you understand what is actually happening when your child asks you the same thing for the 40th time, you will never hear that question the same way again. Let's start with the one that changes everything. 1. They already know the answer. That is the entire point. This is the part that surprises parents most when they first encounter it in the research, because the instinct is to assume that repetitive questioning means the child does not have the information yet, that they are asking again because the answer did not land, that if you could just explain it more clearly, more patiently, in better words, they would stop asking. But developmental psychologists who study early childhood language and cognition have documented something that completely reframes this assumption. Children repeat questions they already know the answer to far more often than they repeat questions whose answers they are still missing. The repetition is not about information. It is about something else entirely. When a child asks you the same question again and again, what they are seeking is not the content of your answer. They are seeking the experience of asking and being answered, the transaction itself, the reliable loop of question followed by response, followed by presence. Research from the field of early language acquisition, including foundational work by developmental psychologist Jean Piaget, and later studies on pragmatic language development, established that children between the ages of 2 and 5 use questioning not primarily as an information-gathering tool, but as a social bonding mechanism, a way of initiating and sustaining connection with a caregiver. The question is not a request for data, it is an invitation to interact, and the answer, your answer, any answer, is confirmation that the invitation was accepted, that you are here, that you are paying attention, that the channel between you is open. When your child asks you what is for dinner for the 9th time in an hour, they are not confused about the meal plan. They are checking that you are still there, still responsive, still available. That is the first thing the repetition is doing, and it's already more meaningful than it looked. 2. They are practicing something their brain is not yet finished building. Here is what a young brain is doing in the years between 2 and 5 that most parents never fully appreciate. It is building at a rate that will never be matched again the neural architecture for language, not just vocabulary, not just grammar, the deeper structure of how language works as a tool for organizing thought, for making sense of experience, for navigating the social world. And the primary mechanism through which that architecture gets built is repetition, not passive repetition, active repetition. Repetition with variation, with response, with the specific feedback loop that comes from asking a question and receiving an answer from another human being. When your child asks you the same question 40 times, they are not being inefficient, they are being extraordinarily efficient. They are drilling a neural pathway the same way a musician drills a scale, not because they don't know the notes, but because knowing the notes is not the same thing as is owning them. Research from developmental neuroscience, including studies on synaptic pruning and early language acquisition, shows that the neural connections that survive into adulthood are specifically the ones that are activated repeatedly in the early years. Connections that are used become stronger. Connections that are not used are pruned away. Your child's repetitive questioning is a form of neural investment. They are strengthening the pathways for language, for social exchange, for the cognitive habit of curiosity itself, through the sheer volume of practice. Every time you answer, you are completing the circuit. You are providing the response that tells their developing brain, this pathway works, this loop produces results, this is worth keeping. You are not just answering a question, you are building a mind. 3. They are using your answer to regulate something they cannot name. This one requires sitting with because it asks you to think about emotion in a way that is different from how most of us were taught to think about it. Young children, particularly between the ages of 2 and 4, do not have the neurological infrastructure to manage their own emotional states independently. The prefrontal cortex, the region of the brain responsible for emotional regulation, for holding difficult feelings without being overwhelmed by them, is not fully developed until the mid-20s. In early childhood, it is barely online at all. What this means in practice is that children in this age range are constantly experiencing emotional states that are larger than their capacity to contain them. Anxiety about something coming, uncertainty about something that happened, a vague unease they cannot locate or label. And one of the primary ways they regulate those states is through the repetitive solicitation of a familiar, predictable, calming response from the person whose presence is most regulating to them, you. When your child is anxious about an upcoming event and asks you 20 times whether you will be there, they are not doubting your word. They are using your reassurance the way a nervous system uses rhythm, not for the content of the reassurance, but for the felt experience of receiving it. Research on co-regulation, the process by which a caregiver's calm, consistent responses help organize a child's dysregulated nervous system, consistently shows that predictable, repeated parental responses to children's bids for reassurance produce measurable reductions in cortisol and heart rate variability in young children. Your answer, the same answer you have given 15 times, is not landing in their ears, it is landing in their nervous system, and their nervous system needs it again not because the information expired, but because the calming effect of receiving it is temporary, and the underlying anxiety is still there. The repetitive question is a symptom of an emotional state, not a communication gap. When you understand that, the frustration of answering it shifts slightly. You are not repeating yourself. You are regulating someone who cannot yet regulate themselves. And hey, if this is changing how you hear those moments, hit like and subscribe, because the next point is the one most parents find most unexpected. 4. The question has a different shape each time, even when the words are identical. This one is subtle, and it is the reason that simply giving a recorded answer would never satisfy a child the way a live one does. When your child asks you the same question over and over, they are not asking exactly the same question. On the surface, the words are identical, but the emotional context is different each time. The need underneath the question shifts. The specific kind of reassurance or connection or confirmation they are seeking in that particular moment is not always the same thing, even when the sentence is. Developmental psychologists who study children's communicative intent, the actual purpose behind children's language, have documented that children use repeated, surface-level questions to probe for different kinds of responses. They are reading your tone as much as your words, your body language, your availability, whether you answer while looking at them or looking at your phone, whether your voice carries warmth or distraction. They are, in the language of developmental science, social referencing through questioning, using your response not just to receive information, but to assess your emotional state, your engagement, and the safety of the current moment. A study from researchers at the University of Chicago examining children's questioning behavior found that children were significantly more likely to repeat questions when the initial answer was delivered distractedly or without eye contact, and significantly less likely to repeat when the answer came with full presence and physical attunement. They were not asking again because the words were wrong. They were asking again because the connection they were also seeking had not quite been made. What this means in practice is that sometimes the most efficient response to the 40th asking of the same question is not a better answer. It is a moment of full presence, eye contact, a hand on their shoulder, an answer delivered as if the question were genuinely interesting, because to them it genuinely is. 5. It is building something that will outlast this phase by decades. Here is the part that is hardest to hold on to in the middle of the 40th repetition, when you are tired, when you have things to do, when the question has stopped sounding like a question and started sounding like a small, relentless alarm. What your child is building through this phase is not just language, not just nervous system regulation, not just neural pathways for curiosity. They are building a relationship with inquiry itself. The children who are answered consistently, warmly, and without visible irritation during the repetitive questioning phase, the children whose curiosity is met with presence rather than dismissal, develop something that researchers have identified as one of the most significant protective factors in long-term academic and cognitive development. They develop what psychologists call epistemic curiosity, a stable, intrinsically motivated drive to seek information and understanding, a relationship with questions that is positive, rewarding, and self-sustaining. Research from the work of developmental psychologist Susan Engel, who spent years studying children's questions in home and classroom environments, found that children who experienced consistent, engaged responses to their questions in early childhood asked significantly more questions as they grew older, not fewer, more. The answering did not satisfy the curiosity, it fed it. Children whose questions were routinely dismissed, minimized, or answered with visible impatience showed measurable decreases in questioning behavior over time, not because they became less curious, but because they learned that curiosity expressed was not welcome. Every time you answer the question, even for the 40th time, even when your voice is a little tired than you would like, you are telling your child something that goes far beyond the content of your reply. You are telling them that questions are safe to ask, that curiosity is welcome here, that the impulse to seek understanding is something worth acting on because acting on it produces connection and response rather than irritation and silence. That message, embedded in thousands of answered questions across the early years, becomes part of how they move through the world, how they approach school, how they handle uncertainty, how they feel about not knowing something and needing to find out. You are not just answering a question, you are building a questioner. 6. What to do when it genuinely becomes too much. None of this means you are required to answer every question with the same warmth and presence at hour 7 of a difficult day as you brought to hour 1. You are a person. Your regulation has limits, and a parent who is genuinely depleted is not serving their child by performing patience they do not have. Here is what the research actually supports when the repetitive questioning has pushed you past your threshold. Name what is happening without making the child wrong for it. You have asked me that question many times today. I have answered it every time. I am feeling a little tired of answering it right now. This does something more valuable than simply redirecting. It models the very emotional vocabulary and self-awareness you are trying to help them build. It shows them what it looks like to know your own emotional state, to name it honestly, and to communicate it without losing warmth. Research on parental emotion coaching, work pioneered by psychologist John Gottman, found that children whose parents named their own emotions clearly and without drama in moments of frustration showed significantly stronger emotional regulation and empathy development than children whose parents either suppressed visible frustration or expressed it without explanation. You can be honest about your limits and still be their safe person. Those are not competing priorities. And then, when you've had a moment, come back. Answer the question one more time, not because they needed the information, but because returning to them after a moment of depletion and recovery is its own answer to a deeper question they are always asking underneath the obvious one. Are you still here? Are you still mine? Does your patience for me come back after it runs out? Let it come back. That return, repeated across 1,000 small moments of depletion and recovery, is not just glib parenting, it's the lived, embodied, daily proof that love is not a finite resource. When your child asks you the same question for the 40th time, they are not testing your patience, they are not failing to retain information, they are not being deliberately difficult. They are practicing language on the brain that is still building it. They are regulating a nervous system that cannot yet regulate itself. They are checking that curiosity is welcome here. They are using your answer as a rhythm their anxiety needs to hear again. They are learning, through the specific experience of being answered, what it feels like to be someone whose questions matter. Answer them, not always perfectly, not always with the patience you wish you had, but consistently, warmly enough, present enough, because what they are building in these moments, question by question, answer by answer, is not a memory of a patient parent, it is a self, one that knows questions are worth asking, that reaching towards someone produces a response, that curiosity is not inconvenient but welcome. That self will walk into every classroom, every relationship, every moment of uncertainty in their adult life, carrying what you built here, in the kitchen, on a Tuesday, answering the same question for the 40th time.